What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So this is a different type of request that I got. This is a request from a subscriber of mine that's an avid NBA fan. Love the historical videos that are out there and on my channel. So he had a request. He wanted me to do, I guess, pretty much like a review and a critique of another YouTuber's video. Um, this is something I'm not totally comfortable doing. I think there's too much of this going on right now as far as YouTube channels, going around and critiquing other people's pages and channels and whatnot. Um, so I'm just going to tell you what I would do differently. Okay, that's all. So the YouTuber name is Austin Sweat, and the video is called "Ranking the Greatest Big Threes in NBA History." I'll put a link to this video in my description box below. All right. So before he gives his top 10 as far as big threes are concerned, he tells you that he does not include trios that haven't won championships, so there'll be no Run TMC on this list. Um, and he does not hold the old school as highly in regard as maybe someone like me and others. That's his opinion. That's his right to do so. So I think this is his top 10. All right. I might not have everything in correct order, but I think this is pretty much his top 10. At number 10, I think he had LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love. At number 8, he had Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, and Bill Laimbeer. At number 8, he had Bill Russell, Bob Cousy, and Tom Heinsohn. At number 7, I believe he had um, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. At number 6, he had Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. At number 5, he had Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish. At number 4, he had Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy. At number 3, he had Tony Parker, Mount Ginobili, and Tony Parker. No, excuse me, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy. At number 3, Tim Duncan, Mount Ginobili, and Tony Parker. At number 2, he had Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson. Number 1, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman. Now, how do I feel about his list? Like me personally, it's not bad. He knew that he would get criticized in his comment section. People that wouldn't agree with where he had people ranked, whatever. Um, these are just things that jump out at me. Um, whenever, okay, I'll just tell you what I think. Okay, he mentions that he does not include the big three of Ray Allen, Sam Cassell, and Kevin and excuse me, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett. But in the video, he also mentions how much Kevin Love struggled with his overall play and injuries. And it leads me to wonder why he has the Cavaliers trio over the Boston Celtics. I get it; they did win the only championship in the history of that franchise, the first championship in 52 years for the Cleveland area, for any sports franchise. The only 3-1 comeback in the history of the NBA Finals. But at the same time, that team grossly underachieved. Kevin Love was not in the NBA Finals due to injuries in 2015. Kyrie Irving missed most of the finals in 2015 due to injury. Um, in 2018, Kyrie Irving wasn't even there anymore because he had been traded. And in 2017 and 2018, they got blown out by the Golden State Warriors. All right, only winning 1 out of 9 playoff games during that span. And in 2016, even though it was an impressive comeback, They did benefit from Draymond Green, who was playing his best basketball in his career. Even though I still think he's a bum, he was playing very well at that particular time, the best basketball of his career during that finals. Matter of fact, that playoff year. And perhaps even more important in that game, Andrew Bogut went out due to injury. So they did benefit greatly from that. If it were not for these things, you can make the argument that they would have never won a title. Contrast that with, the big three with Boston. They made a 40-game turnaround or so from 2007 to 2008. They won 66 games in 2008. Although they did have too many series needlessly go deep that year, they still got the job done. And you can make an argument that if it wasn't for Garnett's injury in 2009, they probably would have went to the finals again in 2009. They went to two NBA finals, 2008, 2010. They were together longer, and they were very influential in the eventual trend of the big three. People will say that it was LeBron James that started this trend, but LeBron James was pressured to do that because of the big three in Boston, which gave him so much trouble. They were his version of the Detroit Pistons. Speaking of Detroit Pistons, whenever I think of them, I don't think of them as a big three. I think of them as a great team. It wasn't like they were a top heavy team and then, it was a complete drop off. I do believe that Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars were their best players during the championship run. But they also had other really good players on their team. Not just Bill Laimbeer, but John Sally and Dennis Rodman. And at the time, Rick Mahorn was pretty solid. Mark Aguirre was a solid player. He was a really good scorer with the Dallas Mavericks in the 80s. So, yeah, you know, it is what it is. With the Boston Celtics, Russell, Bob Cousy, and Tom Heinsohn, um, honestly, if you're going to pick a big three from that team, I think it'd be better to pick maybe Bill Russell, Sam Jones, and John Havlicek because they encompass more of that run. Cousy played more in the 50s and early 60s. He was gone by 1964. Um, Russell won 11 titles. Sam Jones won 10. Havlicek won 6, but 8 overall, 2 more in 1970, 74, and 76. Havlicek was their best overall player. Bill Russell even tell you that. He said so once before, more than once. But I don't really think of Boston as a big three either. But nevertheless, he does rank them pretty low. Many people don't have as high regard for them, I guess, as you know maybe modern teams, but they still were great. One omission that I do notice is I wonder where is the ranking for why is there no mention of George Mikan, Vern Mickelson, and Jim Pollard? They all won 4 championships together as members of the Minneapolis Lakers. In fact, Jim Pollard and George Mikan won 5 titles together. Mickelson came in 1949 after their first title together. So yeah, in reality, why are they not being mentioned? Another thing I would do differently is I would take out the big three of Curry, Thompson, and Green. I would get rid of them because Draymond Green is not a big three player, and I say it to my dying day. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. And I would just include the big three of Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, who I think are one of the great all-time trios in the history of the NBA. Um, what else do I want to say? LeBron James, Wade, and Bosh. I don't have any issues with that, whatever, or whatsoever. I don't have any issues with that. Um, I think he ranks the trio of Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish way too low. Way too low. I don't understand how he ranks them, you know, in that ranking. You can make the argument that perhaps they are the greatest trio ever. When I was growing up as a kid and teenager, they were considered the greatest, front line in the history of the NBA. And many people still tell you that. So I don't understand why they rank so low. They won 3 championships. They won in a very competitive time in the Eastern Conference. Um, I don't get it. Um, as far as Michael, Scotty, and Robin, Dennis Rodman being number one, that's very, very debatable. As far as trio, um, they were extraordinarily dominant together. You had Dennis Rodman, who was at that time the best rebounder in the NBA by far. Still a great, great defender, though not as versatile as he had been with Detroit. Scottie Pippen was just starting to exit out of the apex of his career, but he still was a great defender and a pretty decent scorer, especially the first year he was together with the big three. And then Michael Jordan, wasn't quite the same player he was before 1994, but he still was an exceptional basketball player, the best player in the league. Um, so I don't have a problem with people saying number one, but I could easily see, you know, Bird, McHale, and Parrish being put ahead of him, or you know, so Duncan, Monginobili, and Tony Parker. I don't really have a problem with that. They were together longer than probably anybody else on that list. They never repeated, but I don't really have any problems with, uh, you know, we don't have too many problems with this list. Just, some people I think are being omitted. I would include, and some people are ranked a little bit low. You could also make an argument that maybe a trio like Willis Reed, Earl Pearl Monroe, and Walt Clyde Frazier should be on this list. 3 NBA Finals appearances in a span of 3 seasons, 2 NBA championships, or 4 seasons, excuse me, 3 NBA championships. You know, why they're not included. You know, he omitted this big three earlier. He mentions it, but I would include them. I would include Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bob Dandridge, who was like the Kawhi Leonard of the 1970s. Uh, Bob Dandridge is the only player in the history of the NBA to average 20 points per game or more in the NBA Finals, if I'm not mistaken. He played in 3 NBA Finals and not be in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, there's the big three of Kareem, Oscar, and Bob Dandridge. They're not even on this list. But he does mention that he has a bias against the old school. So, like I said, that's his opinion. To me, I think that the argument about how much smaller players were back then is grossly exaggerated. Now, if you're talking about the 1940s, then yeah, I'm with you 100%. Okay, I'm with you 100%. Back in that time, you had 5'11" guys playing power forward and center. Okay, yeah, ridiculous. But by the late 1950s, um, the league was much, much more um, advanced, in my opinion, than it had been, say, 10 or 12 years before. You know what I'm saying? Players were a little bit smaller, but not to the degree that people like to make it out to be. Like when the league first started, the average height was about 6'2". This is 1946, 1947. The average height was about 6'1", 6'2". All right, but by the late 50s, the average height was, I believe around 6'4", going on 6'5". So today's NBA, the average height is 6'6". So it's not a huge disparity, you know. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.